Today's participants are Kristin Congdon, and Richard Gilson. We join the conversation in the faculty lounge.
When you walk in, it's structured so you see the Egyptian
Right.
flat paintings, and
Yeah.
and then you transition through the Renaissance, and you go, wow! All of
Yeah.
a sudden, you perceive through the eyes of the artist.
Yeah.
So that means the interpretation part of that and the meaning part. So it is striking, and I'm not sure whether that is a result of upbringing. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think it helps you pay attention to certain things
I think
that
so.
many other people wouldn't pay attention to because you watched your stepfather pay attention
Right.
in a certain kind of way.
Well, it's sort of like the meaning of things. You can see something, and seeing it doesn't mean that you perceive it.
Right.
You have a deeper
Right.
connection between the experience of seeing and your memories, and how that intertwines with the artist's background, with the interpretation of the art, and whatever.
Right.
These are areas that are not mine, but
But you probably use.
I suspect so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is this human factors thing anyway? I mean, I've been at the university now for 15 years, and I hear all these stories about the human factors program being one of the biggest, most important programs on campus. And here you are, somebody that I've never met until today.
No, we've never met.
What is this?
Well, I always start out saying, well, the long interpretation is, and finally my dad said, don't say that.
Right.
Say it in plain English.
Yeah, so that I understand.
So that he understands. And I usually say it's how to make it easier and safer to use machines and systems. It could be consumer products, it could be spacecraft, it could be computers, it could be airplanes.
Okay, and when airplanes is what you mostly do, right?
I do. I have a lot of specialty in airplanes, yes. I've been a pilot for 37 years and have thousands of hours of flying as in a variety of testing environments. Flew the Atlantic for Mrs. Lindbergh, the Lindbergh
That's
family.
Just fascinating.
So the flying experience I have a lot of.
So you just fly the little ones, or you know how to fly the big ones too?
Well, they know probably 60 different types of airplanes and helicopters. I'm a flight instructor in helicopters as well as airplanes.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really make any difference whether it's a big or small airplane. Add power, they go up. You take off power, and they come down. They're all basically the same.
Yeah. So you try to make them safer for us. So you're looking at safety kinds of things, or you're looking
Sure.
at how people interact with machines so that they might make mistakes with them?
How to avoid mistakes and how to use them more efficiently.
Okay.
And
Okay. So you're assuming that there's some kind of universal there, that all humans will approach a machine in a certain kind of way.
Well, the
Is that
designers
true?
do a lot of times. You get into something where you have a computer application and you look at it and you keep making this mistake all the time and say, well, gee, darn, it's my mistake. Well, no, it isn't. It's maybe the designer's mistake.
Right.
And so in aviation, the consequences are pretty severe.
Right.
So really the way I started this, and when I was a student at Princeton, essentially it was in prior to that I was only an engineer, and I was actually a math major.
So you started as a math major and then became an engineer?
Sort of had enough for a dual major.
Okay.
And so I took a couple of courses in psychology, and as it turned out, I sort of got bored. And this is with all due respect to engineering, but I was doing research one day, and campus was closed, and I needed to make money to stay in school, and so I was looking out, and this fellow's walking along having a grand old time, and he walked flat into a stop sign, and it went like that on his face.
Yeah.
And since nobody was on campus, he looked around to see if anybody had seen it. And I was on the 3rd floor, and I opened up the window and said, "Yeah."
So this was kind of a turning point for you.
It was definitely a turning point.
So it was a philosophical kind of thing?
It was an epiphany.
Okay.
It was.
And
it was
what did
like,
it say to you?
It said, "Gee, if that was the most exciting thing you've done today, you've got to do something else."
Right.
So I took a class in thinking,
Uh-huh.
which is a part of psychology, and the professor said, "You should go to graduate school."
Oh.
And so he sent me to a professor at Princeton, and I worked there in sensory psychology, how we see, hear, smell, taste, touch,
Uh-huh.
and with some great people there. Just actually a Nobel Prize winner in hearing,
Oh.
and it was a wonderful time, and it was an academic time where. The first time I left after a year and a half, hadn't been out of town, and went to, I don't know whether it was Walmart or Kmart. I looked around and said to my wife, Liz, I said, "I think these people are a little strange." And she looked at me and she said, "No, they aren't."
Oh.
It was me, because it had been so refined
Oh.
atmosphere.
Oh, very
So
interesting.
it was an interesting time. It was a wonderful time. And the transition is essentially the human to the machine.
Uh-huh.
So before human factors had really developed, how do we design things from my engineering standpoint, and how do we think about those things from a human standpoint? Well, gee, you can't change evolution that much. For example, aviation in 100 years, we
Right.
can't evolve the body. So what do we do? Design the machine in a different way to adapt to the body.
So that's why I'm concerned about why we have to sit in those little seats in the plane and get all crumped up when we go traveling somewhere.
It's all
That's
down.
economics.
It's economics,
Yeah, right.
exactly.
So they don't care whether you're comfortable or not. They
Well, there's care. They tried to pack more in one time, and I was asked about a design to make zigzag seats to walk up and down the aisle, and
Yeah.
sort of nixed that.
I think that was a good thing to nix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it does cause other things. For example, the high seats are so you can put luggage underneath.
Right.
Well, that causes people to have their legs so that their muscles are sort of bunched up underneath because their feet are not on the floor for some people,
Right.
which means that they may have some problems with
The circulation.
circulation,
Yeah.
and on long distance flights that may lead to other things.
Mm-hmm.
So one design leads to something else.
Yeah.
And so in human factors, to answer your question, is to deal with design aspects from the human side. In psychology, the engineering side is from the machine side.
Yeah. So you do some defense kinds of things too, don't you?
Sure.
So it's not just commercial planes, but it's also how can pilots be safer?
Yes.
And how can we be more efficient in the military? Those kinds of things?
Yes, absolutely. Some of that is under clearances, so obviously I can't say anything about that. But
So you do the kinds of work that you can't talk about?
yeah. Well, it's great fun.
It's just, yeah.
It's where
So the military hires you, or the Defense Department?
Defense Department, where a bunch of people get together in think tanks, and they put us behind steel doors and the handprints and the eye prints and or whatever they are.
Do you do that in Research Park, or do you go somewhere
No,
to
you
do
have
that?
you have to do it elsewhere.
Okay.
And
Because I know we have those kinds of places at Research Park, or supposedly, at least that's the story.
these have to be in elsewhere.
Oh.
And the great thing is you get to meet some of the best people in the world,
Wow.
and you get to talk with them and spend days with them and
Figure out what they're thinking.
figure out problems and
Yeah.
take one side of the issue and take another side. It's just great fun.
Huh.
So
That's terrific.
So
how human factors is relatively new. Is that true, or am I just imagining
no,
that?
you're right. It's about 50 years. World War II was really the onset. There were things before then, but World War II had a lot of input, mistakes in designs,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly 3 Mile Island was a big turning point.
My mother was there when the 3 Mile Island happened.
No.
No, she was about 15 miles away.
Near
Harrisburg. Well, she was in one of the little teeny towns. She's a minister. And I remember that because we were really nervous about it.
Yes.
And she did develop some problems with throat cancer later on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but it's okay. She was taken care of. But of course, you always have that sense of what would happen in a lingering way from a disaster like that.
Well, there are a whole bunch of aspects about that, but one of the larger aspects is the idea that we always thought that more information was better.
Right.
It isn't.
Why isn't it?
You can be overwhelmed by information.
Oh, I feel overwhelmed most times.
Yeah, it's like
email.
Exactly.
Like, don't tell me all that stuff. I don't want to know.
Or reading this journal and saying, here's 25 pages
Right.
and only one sentence is really relevant or none.
Or so many journals you think that you need to have, and you don't get any of them read because it's just too much. You can't even make the decision.
Right. In an effort to inform about everything, you inform about nothing.
So are human factors people going to help my overwhelmingness?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
What are you going to do to make my life easier as a professor?
Simplify.
I mean, I like the idea that you were telling me that you get away from the university and go to Cedar Key and you fly there. You don't even have to mess with the traffic.
No.
And you do that every weekend.
Yeah.
And it's not like, I mean, I know this is true because when I go somewhere, which is supposed to be just to get away, it's really working time. It's the time when your mind just kind of allows everything to get in line with the ideas, I guess you might say. It's like the importance of sleep.
Yes. Oh, you filter out, when you let your mind loose, you filter out the things that are just trivial, the little telephone call, the little thing you need to do, and the bigger things sort of rise to the surface. One time after, and I know you've been over, I heard one time you were in Africa, but one time from coming back from Australia, I looked at my desk and it was filled up with things, and I finally said, that's it. I can't get through this. I pushed it to the side and literally put it on the floor. Just dumped it on the floor.
And you left it on the floor?
Left it on the floor for about 2 weeks. I stepped over it. Surprisingly, the things that were important rose up again.
How did
came on
people would call you and say, Dick, did you get to that?
Exactly.
Wow.
And the things that weren't important, I finally just swept it away.
Yeah.
And it worked out just fine.
We need to learn to do that a little bit more, I think, to be able to get through our lives.
To get to the successful students, I think what to create a theme is so important. So that they understand, for example, I'm teaching tonight neuroscience. And the brain has so many aspects about it, but the fundamental things of how it works, that it transmits by electricity, that we think by chemicals, and where that happens in conjunction, and how it works in layers, that the spine does one thing and the base of the brain does another, and there's a nice place in there for shifting cars. There's a nice place in there for loved ones, and there's a wonderful place in there for memories of things and planning things. So if you take it by themes as opposed to here's all the particular names and structural areas, which they have to know, it simplifies, and it seems to me that's important.
So that's the way they can kind of categorize things and make sense of things.
Exactly.
So why is it, I mean, here you are, you're one of the top scholars at UCF, and why are you at UCF? I mean, what is it about UCF that is so exciting for you?
Oh, it's really a funny story. I was teaching at Ohio State. I was a professor up at Ohio State, Big Ten University, and and I got a call from a friend of mine, and she said she was considering going to UCF or to University of Southern California. Oh. And I said, well, that's interesting. Yeah. You know, she put it on a par. Yeah. Finally, I was contacted because she went to Southern California for another person, and so I gave some recommendations. And they said, we'd like to do a feasibility study for a PhD program.
Oh.
and first in the state of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, well, why don't I discuss this with my wife, Liz? And so this is February in Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, whoa.
And I said, how
Florida
about to
sounds
spending
good
a
then.
year
Yes.
down in Florida?
Oh, so
We already
that's-
had a home down here.
So you were already at Cedar Key before that.
Already had that.
And you were already flying from OSU to Cedar Key.
Yes.
Smart guy you are.
And
That's the smart thing. Yeah.
so I said, would you like as a birthday present, it was in February,
Yeah.
to go down for a year in Florida? And she said, yes. And I said, should we discuss this? And she said, we have.
Oh. She's got her priorities right.
So I came down here essentially to create the first PhD program in human factors.
Oh, I didn't know that. See?
Oh,
Wow.
yeah. And so it took about 3 years of planning, or actually it took a year of planning, and I was asked, why don't you stay and implement it? And I said, well, I'm going to need this, 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 and this. And they said,
Okay.
okay. And I said, I should have this.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
So I spent about 3 years planning it, and I went to the final part of this was going to the Board of Regents to present this.
Oh.
And there's two parts. The first part is, so I'm up in Tallahassee, the provost is there, the president's there, and the first day they go through a committee, and the committee
This must have been Trevor Colburn way back
right,
then? Yeah.
exactly right. So they go through this, the Saturday before, or the day before, is the committee meetings. And they had 5 people on the committee of new programs. We were 4, number 4. First person got up and gave I thought, an excellent delivery. They had a motion, denied.
Wow. Wow. Did they say why? Do you remember?
I don't remember at all. I was stunned.
Oh, whoa. Like, what's going to happen to me now?
I'm number 4. The second one got up, modifying notes, gave a delivery, turned down. The third one was turned down.
You must have been thinking, this is a bad day.
I'm trying to write notes and change what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Our UCF PhD program, is there a motion? The motion, there's a motion, there's a second. There's a second. All those in favor, aye. And then it was to number 5. And I didn't even get out of my seat. The provost came over, leaned in my ear, and he said, great speech.
Oh my gosh, that's terrific. That's a great story.
I never said a word.
That was the most powerful, important speech you probably worked on at all. Yeah, that's great. That's
Never
funny.
said a word.
Everybody must have celebrated after that.
Oh, it was wonderful. And the next day it's pro forma pretty much.
Yeah.
So it was fine, but it was great. And it says you do your work beforehand.
Right.
And you don't have to
So
do
it was
the
all
other.
there, apparently.
It was there.
Yeah.
And we, the natural placement of UCF in the state, the people around, the research park next door, the Navy, all those things were naturals.
Okay, so it's the location that makes human factors so important.
Yeah, and the gravity of the people. I mean, I had enough from the chancellor at the time. I think it was Chancellor Reed, who said, bring in major people. Here's a number of people you can bring in. We're able to do it. You create a sort of a magnet, a sort of a critical mass that draws other people.
Yeah. And
once that was done in the first 10 years, it just took off. The biggest thing that happened, I think, here was I was asked by a staffer to name the program.
Oh.
And they said, you're going to call it PhD in Human Factors. And I thought, it seemed like it was restrictive. And I said, well, why don't we call it PhD in Psychology?
Oh.
Which was,
then you can do so much more, can't
which
you?
was the best thing.
That was a smart thing to do.
Maybe lucky, but it meant that other programs were available without doing all the things I had done.
Right.
We have a clinical PhD program.
They could just fit in under that because you already had it in place.
Yeah,
Now you have tracks.
They're essentially their own programs, but they didn't have to do all the groundwork.
Right.
So in the industrial organization, it worked out very well. It was a good, lucky move.
Very good.
So it was a fun thing to do.
Well, the rumor around campus is that psychology is a happy department.
It is a very happy department.
Yeah. Not all departments are happy, but this is happy because people love their work, and I think they're supported in their work, and there's a lot of good people, as you say, in that program.
It is a convivial department. People like each other. We don't socialize very much.
You're busy doing your work and going to Cedar Key.
But I mean, to help out the other person to teach a course or to help out in a piece of research or collaborate in some way, use students together. We do that, and it's fun. We have a really interesting people. It's a fun department.
So tell me about one of or maybe the highlight of your career. Is there something real that you feel that you have done that has really made a difference?
Highlight of the career. Maybe I haven't reached it yet.
You're still working on it.
I'm still working on it.
So what would it be?
You know, I think that reaching status and future work as in human factors in aviation particularly. I do a lot of work, asked to do a lot of things in and outside the university and in solving problems in aviation, and to move that into the future. I'd say that's probably the biggest thing.
Okay.
I'm doing some work now in actually in neuroscience, since I teach more and more of the undergraduate and graduate neuroscience in an area of Parkinson's. Because as you'll see, I got a little bit of a shake here. And about a year ago, I self-diagnosed, since I teach this stuff, Parkinson's.
No kidding. So you knew that you had that.
Oh, yeah.
Because they say that usually those are the last people to know. But
I teach this stuff. So I already have 2 patents in this area in deep brain stimulation. I've been in observing surgery and working on viral transport systems and other kinds of things, stem cells research.
Stem cell research too.
So I figure maybe aviation will be a sideline, and maybe the Nobel Prize would be very nice in Parkinson's and the other associated diseases of neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's and a variety of others.
So are you watching the stem cell research debate real closely?
Yeah, I'm not too, as a scientist, I don't think about the politics very much.
You just want access to what you...
Yeah, I think maybe we're putting too much into the stem cell research in the sense of thinking that's going to be the final word. I really think it's going to be the stem cells are sort of nondescript. They grow up in the neighborhood. So if you put them in a certain neighborhood, they're going to become whatever that neighborhood is.
Okay.
But I think the real thing is to use our own systems and to change the genetic defect in the gene. And you say, well, how can that be done? Well, it's done all the time. Like HIV invades the genes and alters the genes.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we use that for good?
Yeah.
Use the same virus to transport, to put something in there and patch it. So
I find it really fascinating that a psychologist, because you're a psychologist, right? You're not a psychiatrist, would know all of this stuff that seems very medical to me.
Yeah.
But because I think of psychologists as people who basically, you think of the clinical psychologist,
Sure.
and I understand how that translates to human factors. But then when I hear you talk about all this medical kind of stuff, it says to me, either you're doing things that most psychologists don't do, or they do that.
It depends on the psychologist, probably pretty rare, but the theme is I always want to know how something works. How does it work? And so machinery and computers are sort of interesting, and I like to problem solve, but I get bored because if I solve the problem, I want to do other things. I haven't been able to solve the problem in the brain. Now that's a biggie.
Yeah, that is a biggie.
And so the excitement of doing things in areas that nobody knows and discovering something new is so fascinating. You know perfectly well as a researcher the joy of discovering something new the first time.
Right. Right. There's just a certain kind of curiosity that just drives you beyond, everything else. You just have to keep going.
And when you get it, before you publish it, that moment of joy, and then you have to go ahead and write it up and
check
get the
the
papers,
spelling errors, and right.
all that stuff. Yeah. But it is pure fun, and I love to problem solve.
Talk to me a little bit about your upbringing, because I know that you had a stepfather who was a very well-known artist, and I'm wondering how that role model created or helped you become who you are today.
It's hard to evaluate. Childhood was, I don't remember much before I was about 13.
Oh, why was that?
It was I'm not quite sure. It was a pretty
difficult time?
Difficult
So
time.
you perhaps wanted to forget.
Yeah, I probably did.
Yeah.
We moved many places.
And you weren't very wealthy, and money was an issue.
We didn't have any money at all. And that's fine.
Yeah.
But there were other troubling times. And so, and when my mother divorced, my mother and father were divorced, I thought it was my fault, like every kid.
Right.
And I was about 14, and it was a tough time.
Yeah.
But she married this artist, Emery Clark, was a caricaturist, and he was a wonderful man.
That's great.
And it's like an opening of a world. It's like a just a different world I'd never seen before. Light came in.
So did he teach you to see, or did he teach you to think about how to see?
Think.
Okay.
He taught me how to think about anything, and he opened up horizons. He's a creative, sensitive man, and just all of a sudden the doors were open, the light was there.
So do you think this relates to the psychology interest too? Because he was if he does caricatures, he's trying to get not only at physical kinds of things, but how a personality can be conveyed.
I'm not sure. Actually, if I were to predict it when I was 16, whether I'd be a university professor, I would have never thought that.
Oh, what did you think you would be?
Well,